Welcome to In Studio Live, the 8th edition, and it's great to see so many people already online and already in the chat. Good evening to Terry, to Peter, to Andy, Stuart, Michael. I want to give a very special welcome back to Kev Pack, who wasn't able to join us last week because he was in hospital with the dreaded COVID. So it really is great to see you back and to have you join us again, Kev. So just sending you all the best prayers and good wishes for a full recovery quickly. So great to see you online with us tonight. Okay, so let's get started. Now, yes, right. Oh, and Rick's joined us as well. So Michael's saying that he's in trouble because it's his photo on the 3-minute challenge tonight. No, you're not in trouble there, Michael. Well, not much anyway. Right, yeah, if you are new to this live stream, please take the time to subscribe to the channel. It does mean a lot to me. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. So please subscribe. It really does help me as this goes. And the way these work is they stay up in their entirety on YouTube for a week or two, and then I'll edit them down. But the full version will remain in my academy for my academy members after that, and on YouTube we'll just have some highlights. We've already started having questions appear in the chat. I've got one noted down from Peter, which I'll deal with later, about well, I'll talk about it later. If you've got any questions, please put them in the chat. Keep in mind that there is a delay of about 30 seconds to 2 minutes on this, in that when you hear me say this, that will be 30 seconds after I've actually said it, which means there is a delay with seeing the questions on here. And I did have one occasion where I asked for questions, there didn't appear to be any coming in, and because there was nothing there, I closed down the stream and finished it off at the end, and then they all appeared because of the delay. So get your questions in quickly, it will be good to do that. And right, so if you are watching this on the replay, then if you've got questions, please put them in the comments field. The chat's only open during the live stream. So what have we got on the show this week? Well, it's another packed show. I am trying to keep them under the hour. I'm not sure whether I'm going to manage it tonight, but we'll see. We've got our usual news slot, the usual 3-minute Lightroom challenge slot. First bit of Q&A, and I've already had 2 questions for that. One is about auto mode in Lightroom and what I think of it, and the other is an interesting challenge I was given. As I was asked by Peter over in Sheffield whether it's possible to change the colour of someone's lips in Lightroom, and it's the sort of thing that you might think, no, go over into Photoshop to do it. But surprisingly, it's not as tricky as you might think to be able to do it in Lightroom. And I'll give you a full demo of how to do that later on in the stream. And just to say, I've never seen anyone else do this in Lightroom. So the technique is purely my own and based on my knowledge of how Lightroom works and what you can actually get it to do, and it's quite surprising. There's an awful lot you can get Lightroom to do. So the challenges go on. We're going to continue with our talking about backups, and I have got some animated infographics to try and illustrate that. It comes from a presentation I normally do on SHIP, so hopefully you'll find that interesting and helpful. The challenge keeps coming up. And the beginners section this time, again taken from my Introduction to Digital Photography course, is part 2 on point of view, as in perspective, not as in POV and adult levels and things like that. Nope, not that. And then we'll finish off with any questions that have come in on the live stream, and I'll just wrap up at that point. So, what's been happening this week? Well, I've started to set up a means of getting out various videos to people on the on YouTube, starting with Tuesdays. Tuesdays, my 2-minute challenges on Tuesdays at 2 o'clock. So the first one went out last week. This week was number 2, which was all about things you can learn about the crop tool, the shortcut keys, the power functions with it that you may not be aware of. And it really is 2 minutes. Well, the bit between me saying the introduction and then wrapping up is about 2 minutes. On Wednesday, I uploaded another Lightroom tutorial, actually. It was a Lightroom edit. And talking about a technique that I've been developing for enhancing the sky. Instead of using the saturation sliders or the color specific sliders, using the dehaze and a way of doing that, and I find it's giving me a much more natural look with certain skies. So that was the tutorial I uploaded on Wednesday. On Thursday, my latest blog post appeared on the website, which for those of you who have had my newsletter, you'll know it's already there. I'm going through the 7 deadly sins of photography. We looked at greed last week. Last week we looked at gluttony. This week it's all about greed and how that translates into the photography world. So maybe have a look at that at some point. Don't leave the live stream now. And then Friday, I uploaded my latest travel log, which is all about the turtles of Sal in Cabo Verde. And just a little bit about the work of a project there called Biodiversity and the work they're doing to conserve turtles. Quick warning about it. It comes with a cuteness warning. Those baby turtles are very cute. So maybe go and have a look at that at some point. Okay, so let's get started with the meat of the live stream and the Lightroom 3-minute challenge. Now, if you're new to the live stream here, you may not know what this challenge is. The challenge is I'm given an image, a raw file that I haven't seen before. It's in its completely unedited state, and I have 3 minutes to do an edit on it to get it up to an edited state for it. And this, I've been doing it each week now. I think this is the 7th one in the series, and I'm still looking for more. I've got some for the next 3 weeks or so, and then I've got a bunch from one person. But what I'm going to try and do is, instead of having a whole lot from one person, I want to give preference to Michael saying running and hiding. Yeah, it's his image. Rather than giving preference to just one person, I'll go back to those images when I run out of others. So if you've not had one done, feel free to submit. If you have had one done, feel free to let me have another, but anyone who's not had one will take preference over having a second, and anyone who has not had a second one done will have preference over somebody who offers me a third, and so on. I'm sure you understand how it all works. So that's it. So the first part of this is I'm going to play in Rick's edit on Michael's image, and let's see what he managed to do with it.
Right, and welcome back to another 3-minute Lightroom edit challenge. My name's Rick Bradbury. I'm recording this separately for Ian for his live stream because I cannot be present for obvious reasons. And today we're editing an image that's been sent in by Michael Walsh. I cannot pronounce your surname. Sorry, Michael. I'm just going to call you Michael. Cool. Right. This is not the image. This is just a holding image. I got to play with a new light from Pixar Pro, the 1200 Pro, or the City 1200 Pro, and it's an absolute monster. 1200 watt-second pack and head. It's rather nice. Anyway, right, let's get to the image. So I've got the timer on the screen. We shall hit... Oh, no, we won't hit start because my phone's gone to sleep. Wake up. There we go. I'll hit start, and here we go. No, I don't want the start menu. Oh, for crying out loud. Right. So here we have the image that's been sent in. Now, Michael sent over an edit of his own, which is as we see there. So we'll jump back to the image and see what we get. Now, if we go, we're in develop. Let's see, shot on a Nikon D810 with a 70 to 200 2.8 at 100mm at f11 ISO 160 of a second. Shot in the studio, as we can see. So it should be nice and sharp, which it is, all in focus. I think this is a cosplay person or subject. Correct me if I'm wrong, I have no idea who the character is. Don't really follow it. But let's see what we can do with this. So we'll put the highlight and shadow warnings on. First thing to go will be, oh good grief, man, I think either the background needs cleaning or your sensor does. Wow. Right. We'll get rid of that. Not quite, but... Okay, let's try that again, shall we? Oh, this is where Photoshop's better. Lightroom kind of sucks at this. Right, let's go into there, get rid of that. Yeah, pretty much gone. Right, let's do some basic corrections. I mean, for that kind of work, I'm going into Photoshop. So I'm going to brighten it up just a little bit there. I'm going to cool down the skin tones just a touch because they look a little bit warm. Was it shot on Bowens by any chance, or is it just the camera reading warm as such? Now, oh, I've got a minute left. I think we need -5 on that. There. Oh. Brighten that up just a touch on the curves. Not losing anything in the shadows, although the material that is wearing in the suit, or that they're wearing in the suit, seems to eat light. So of course we lose a ton of detail, which is there. So we'll bring that out a little bit. Drop the exposure just a touch. Add just a little bit of texture, a little bit of clarity. Probably snap the whites up just a little bit, darks up a touch, and then go up a little bit more on the contrast, a little bit of sharpening, and we're good to go. Run out of time. Right, shut that up, there we go. So we've gone from what we had originally, which is kind of a warm toned, a little bit underexposed for my taste for the subjects, to something that's a little bit brighter and I feel a bit more neutral on colour. Again, if we go to the spot removal, that's either the background or your sensor. Yow, I thought mine was bad. Right, there we go. Okay. Right, we'll show hand back to Ian.
Right, something's gone wrong with my display. Right, let's try and sort that one out first. Oh dear, why does this never go smoothly? Right, that's better. Okay, sorry about the little snafu there. I'm not quite sure why it suddenly decided to go into print mode. Yes, I do know why. I've been enabling some hotkeys to try and get some nice smooth moves over between the different scenes and the different monitors and videos. And I think I've managed to jump onto one that's also a hotkey for printing. Oh dear. Oh well, I'll have to watch out for that one, change it for next week. Right, okay, so that was Rick's edit on there. Interesting to see on the chat that Rick was absolutely spot on with it being a Bowen's head. Yep, on there. And yeah, we'll get to the critique a little bit later, Michael, on that. So next part of this will be my version of the edit on there. But before then, let's deal with the Q&A that we've got in. So if there are any additional questions for later on, put them in the chat. And remember, we've got that delay on there, which can slow things down. If you want to send me any questions during the week, my email address is contact@ians-studio.co.uk. So the first question I got this week came from Bill. And he wanted to know, why don't I use auto-click in Lightroom to get a first idea of what the finished image looks like, and then if the results look poor, reset and do it manually? Okay, well, there is a very good reason for that. And if I go over to Lightroom, and there we go, you've got Lightroom on the screen. I'm going to go full screen on this so you can see it properly on there. And the thing with this is a totally unedited image of strawberry venom from a few years ago. And if I use auto on here, look what happens. It really messes it up. It really doesn't help the image at all. And that's particularly because it doesn't know that what I want is a high key image on here. And what I found is that more often than not, using the auto option really degrades. And I found that the number of times it actually helps my edit is a lot fewer than the times it does help. So I don't bother using it. It does have a habit of messing things up. Let me just see if I can find another image at random in here, and just to see what it does with it. So how about a sunset? And I haven't tested this out. So let me go into the develop module on there and full screen so you can see. I just want to hang on. That's a JPEG on there? But supposing it was a raw file, what would happen if I hit auto? Actually not done too bad on there, but typically with something like that, it can really get upset with it. What I was looking for was a DNG to see what it does with it. So let me try and find one. Yeah, okay, let's go with this. To the develop module. And I'm just going to reset everything so it's completely reset. What happens with auto? Actually, it's not done a bad job this time. I know that, I think it was about 2 versions ago, Adobe did a lot of work to try and improve auto. So maybe it has improved on it. But the couple of things I do notice is it does have a tendency to bring the highlights a long way down when it's doing it. and it does have a habit of always bringing the shadows up. And to be honest, I like to have that control myself. I tend to edit without using the whites and the blacks that much. And so for me, I just find it easier to start without it. Because typically when I'm creating an image, I usually have a good idea of where I want to end up. So I know right from the start what I'm going to want to change with it, which is why I don't bother with auto. I found that the results with it weren't that brilliant. Right, let's see whether this really does go to where I want. Yes, it has gone back to the right display. Yay, well done me. So let's move on to the next question. This one comes from Ian B. I wonder who that could be. And Ian wants to know, how can viewers help with the live stream? You know where I'm going with this. Yeah, basically, I need to just explain where ways that people can perhaps help me out here, as the live stream's sort of working, but we're not where I need to be yet, and I need to speed that up. Okay, how can you help? Well, you could join my academy. That would be the best way anyone can help me, is to be a member of that. And I know quite a few of you who are on here already are. I'm not going to go plugging on that now, but I need to mention it. That is the best way. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. I've got to get to 1,000 subscribers before I can start earning money through doing this. And at the moment, I'm about 2 away from 250. So I'm not even a quarter of the way there yet. So please, if you aren't subscribed to the channel, please do so. It will mean a lot to me, and it really does help to have that. The other thing which will help, and this may sound strange, but if you can comment on the YouTube videos, the live stream, I know you can't comment on this live stream whilst it's being broadcast, but on the past ones or the other videos that I put up there, if you just put a comment on there, that will actually help, because the algorithm sees that people are interacting with it. In actual fact, what the algorithm is looking for, believe it or not, is not just your comments, but it's looking for me actually replying to comments. And that, knowing that I'm responding, will help my rankings on YouTube. But I can't respond if there aren't any comments to respond to. So if you're able to comment on any of the videos I put up there, I will reply, and it will actually genuinely help me on there. And it doesn't cost you a penny to do it. And similarly with likes, that's another thing that YouTube takes into account, are the number of likes, and particularly how quickly they come in when a video goes live. So if you feel you're able to, just hit the like button. It will help me. And I need to get to a point where I can earn some money through doing these live streams. Otherwise, I've got to concentrate on something else. My business plan has always been to be one for education, and I don't want it to be just for the elite. I want to be able to offer free education as well, but I need to be able to earn money as well. And those little things like that will help me on my way with that, if you're able to do it. And also, if you're able to share links to the video. So if you watch a video that you enjoy and you think, oh, that's a good one, then just share it on Facebook, on Twitter, or wherever, and that will help me with it. Yeah, subscribe to my newsletter if you haven't already done so. You'll find a link to that on my website. And yeah, images for the 3-minute edit. I'm not going to go on about that. And I'll talk a little bit later about critiquing. I'm doing a very special live stream next week, which is all about critiquing, and there's opportunities for you to have images to be critiqued or to actually be one of the critics. I don't like the term critic for it because it sounds negative, and critiquing isn't negative. It's a positive experience. So yeah, there's that as well. Right, okay, let's move on to a genuine question as opposed to the fake one I've just slipped in there. This one's quite interesting. This is from Peter over in Sheffield, and he asked me, is it possible to change a model's lipstick colour in Lightroom? And the answer, Peter, is yes, it is. So let me get Lightroom ready on the other screen, and yep. We've got Lightroom. Go to here, find the image I was going to do the work on, which is, there we go, into the develop module. Right, okay, this is a photograph of Wendy Louise. Now, this basically is a part edited image. What it actually should look like when it refreshes is that's my final edit on it. However, I'm using this as a way to demonstrate a particular technique rather than showing how I would edit this image, because what I'm about to do is not something I would do to this image, but it's a good image to show the technique on, if you follow what I mean. So let me just reset that back to this. And the question was, how do we change the color of some lips in Lightroom? So I'm going to zoom in so that it's easier to see what's going on. I'm also going to go full screen on this because I'm going to be looking at the screen rather than at the camera. Right, so you normally think about things like changing lips as something to do in Photoshop, but it is actually relatively straightforward to do it here in Lightroom. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to use the adjustment brush, which is up here, or the K key for it. So we go into there. I'm just going to, at this stage, reset everything on there. Always a good practice to do that. Then you can decide what things you want to set. I'm going to enable the overlay mask on here with it. And at the moment, I'm going to say auto for the pins. So now I've done that, what I'm going to do, and I'm not even going to attempt to be very close to the lips on this, I'm going to paint a mask on here. Now you'll notice that I've got nothing set on here because all I'm interested in is defining the area where I'm working, and my overlay mask is set to green on here. If I hit the O key, it toggles it on and off, as you may know, but Shift O toggles through the colours on it. And red's the default. It's difficult to see it on red lips, so when I'm doing something like this, I prefer to set it to green. And the aim is just to paint round and make sure I've covered the entire lips on there. I don't need to be accurate, I just need to make sure that they are all covered like that. So now I can take the overlay off and I can start doing my adjustments on here. And what I want to do at this stage is a very over the top adjustment. Let's say that I'm wanting to make these lips blue. So let's see what happens if I take the temperature right down. Well, that's heading in the right direction. The exposure will darken it off a little bit as well. Perhaps something like that. I could do a colour overlay on top. And I'm starting to get a sort of bluey colour to the lips, but it does everything else, which is not what I want. What I want is just for this to apply to those lips. So the way we solve that one is we use what's called a range mask down here at the bottom. So if I click on that and say colour, what I can now do is I can use the dropper tool here to pick the colour I want. So I'm going to just click here and you'll see almost instantly I've got most of the lips and everything else cleared. Now, if I want to add to that, because there are areas that it's not affected, if I go more severe with the exposure, yeah, you can see, if I go high on it, you can see areas that aren't being affected. So if I hold the shift key down, I can add more bits into the mask. So I think that's got most of the lips. I'm just going to go back down. It is easier to see on the darker version like that. And I think I've got everything, except we've got this bluey effect around the mouth that I don't want. So I want to get rid of that. This is where I now use the erase tool. So I hit the erase tool and I want auto mask on and I want flow at 100 and a fairly small brush, and I'm just going to start painting around the outside here. And can you see how that blue just disappears? I can just tidy it up and it really does just affect the skin areas. Now that I can take that off, it's just going to take me a moment, and sometimes it's difficult to talk on camera and do this all at the same time. I did this a lot quicker last night when I was practicing it. All right, I just go round like that and just tidy that up. I think I've got most of it now. Now on the tooth, a little bit on there. Now this is a slight problem on this one. In the tooth, got a little bit of red lipstick on it. I'm not going to attempt to do much with that. So now what I've done is I've managed to constrain the area that I'm affecting to just the lips. So I've done it a very dramatic colour on here, but actually what I can do now is I can now play around with those colours to get the exact shade I want on this. So let me zoom in. I'm going to hide the pin because it's annoying me at the moment. And let me just show you a little bit about changing colour. Oh, sorry, wrong one. To never, I'll show the pins. Right, now I've done that, I can start to control this a little bit better by, I can bring back that temperature change, I can bring back that exposure change, and you can see how I can be quite subtle with some of these changes. So suppose I just wanted a little bit more of a pinky, oh no, go about there. By choosing the colour that you're overlaying, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the colour that you see. It is literally overlaid on it, and just changing the exposure will change the darkness of it. We can also play around with things like the dehaze, which will actually do strange things with the colour. So you can see I'm effectively darkening it. You can play with the highlights, will affect it as well, and the shadows. And it does take a little bit of work to really sort of understand what each slider is going to do to the image. But you can see here how just slight changes with the exposure will affect the lipstick colour on there. So now I'm going to just wind back to, where was my reset on here? That one. I'm going to copy that to the before setting, which means I can now do a before and after. That's before and that's after, and you can see the difference it's made. Actually, I think there's more. I don't think that's the right before, because I wanted just the one before doing anything to the lips. On this, try and find the right one. Stroke. I'll try that as my before settings. yeah, there you can see how it's just changed the lips and nothing else in there. So I hope, Peter, that that one's been useful for you. It's a bit of an unusual sort of technique, but normally people would think you have to go into Photoshop to do something like that. But it is actually quite surprising what you can do in Lightroom, especially when you start using things like the range mask tools, which are available not only for the adjustment brush, but for the, probably people tend to think of it more with the graduated filter and how you deal with that. But yeah, that is a way of changing lip color. So, right, let's try and get this back over to where I need to be. Yes, brilliant. And I'm going to come out of that because I don't need that again. Right, okay, I'm just going to take a moment to have a look through the chat and see what we've got. Steve was asking about JBODs. Right, okay, let me make a note of that for later. JBODs. Tim's comment about auto. Yeah, he's using it in Adobe Camera Raw. Yeah, Tim, what you will find is that all the controls in Adobe Camera Raw are the Lightroom controls. It's the same engine behind Adobe Camera Raw as it is behind Lightroom, so it does exactly the same. Aha! Right, I have just seen here, finally, somebody's commented, Andy Grady spotted that Benny is wearing his St. George's attire. Yes, indeed, that is absolutely correct. First person to spot him. You know, it's been 5 weeks he's been joining me on these live streams, and this is the first time anyone has spotted him or commented about him. But yeah, he's in his St. George's attire tonight on that. Right, okay, sorry. Let's move on. 3-minute challenge. And this time it's my edit. So let's play in the next video. Hello, welcome to another Lightroom 3-minute challenge. This particular image has been submitted by Michael, and full disclosure at this point, this is actually my second attempt at recording this 3-minute challenge. Sorry, I did it first of all and the recording failed, so I'm having to do it all over again. So unusually this time, it's not the first time I've seen the image. But I'll try and do the same sort of processing as I did last time and try and keep this as honest and as fair as possible. So let's start by pulling up the timer on my my phone so that I have 3 minutes. And my 3 minutes starts now. Okay, so the image we've got here is of a model sitting on a stool on a white background. So let me go over to the develop module. That's the D key for develop, which works better if I have focus on the right program. I'm going to go full screen so you can see better what's going on. Right, so the first thing on here I want to do is sort out the white balance on it. So use that to create the background. Notice there are a few spots on there, which I would normally use the Q option, the spot removal, to deal with. Not got time to go through the whole thing. I need to crop it because we've got the light in at the top. I slightly straighten it at the same time. Bring that into there. Now, I want to tidy up the floor and the background to make it true white. I'm going to try using the whites first of all. That will help, and the highlights just a little bit. If I hit J on the keyboard, that brings in the overlay of when anything is blown out, so I can see. So K for an adjustment brush. I've already got it set to exposure right, high, highlights high, and high feather, auto mask on, and with a large brush I should just be able to go around the outside and tease this into being white as it should be, and just go around something like that. I don't want to do too much of the bottom because I want to keep the reflections in there. Yep, that should do on there. Okay, out of that. I've got 1 minute left. We need to I'll close that. I need to bring out the highlights, the shadows, bring those up. So the shadow slider needs to come up just a bit to bring there. Oh, it's a little bit high on the highlights now, so I'll bring those down, shadows down just a little bit. I've got 30 seconds now. Oh, right, hair across the eye. Now I haven't got time to do that in my 30 seconds, but I'll look at that shortly. We've also got this line down here. Can I get rid of this in time with a Q adjustment brush? Has it gone? Oh, where has it put the thing? J. I've got 10 seconds on this. Where's my pin? Oh, put those on so I can see them. And I just need to adjust where that is. Oh, and that's my time up. So stop at that point. Right, okay, so this was a tricky one to do in 30 seconds. And there are a few things I just want to talk about, extra things I would do with this had I got a bit more time. Well, first of all, you can see I made a bit of a pig's ear down here with dealing with this line. So I can just sort out, probably just bring that out a little bit as well. That should help deal with that. Yeah, that's, where is it? I can't actually see the overlay on here properly. I just bring that down. It needs to be about there. As close as I can do at the moment. Still on that edge. Bring it away from the edge. And then with a very small adjustment brush, a very small cloned stamp brush, I have another go at the remaining little bit on there. And that hopefully will be just that little bit better on it. Oh, it's still not perfect on there. I'd have to play around with that just to deal with that extra bit that's coming out there. Well, if I go over to clone on it, does that help? No, it doesn't. I'll go back to heal with that. I mean, to be fair, at full resolution, you'll hardly see that. I think I've now got all the detail visible in it on there. A little bit bright on the face. Now, this is a sort of bonus. Impossible to do it in the 3 minute time, but I'm just going to deal with that hair just to show you that it is possible to do it. So I'm going to zoom in 2:1 on it so that I can see where I'm actually working. And it is possible to do it with the spot removal tool, but you just have to do it in stages. So Q for that. Let me go full screen so you can see what's going on a little bit better. And if I do, first of all, this top section over here, and that's fine. The next part, if I go down for quite a small brush on this, I can just do the eyebrow, make sure that samples correctly, not from there. I want to sample it from over here. Just that section, so that will work. Then down here, I just want that to come from a little bit further along. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. Next bit, where am I going to take that from? I'm not sure whether that's working. And there shouldn't have been an extra timer on there. Sorry about that. Right. It's difficult to see this with all the pins. So I'm just going to turn them off, or turn them to selected so that it's only the current one that's visible. Let's try and get rid of the hair across the eye there. That's tricky. That really is tricky. Just bringing it along to there. Now, then the section down here. Okay, so take that. I'm not happy with the highlight and what it's done to it. So where are we on here? Yeah, I don't like where it's sampling from on that one. If I delete that and then just try that again, I'm going to do it in two parts this time. Bottom part, and let's sample that from there. This section here, right on the end of the highlight, that's not where I want to sample from. I shall come from there. And the top section from, that's tricky to do. It's not perfect. I'm going to leave it at that. I think at that sort of resolution, that sort of display, that would be okay. So if I fit it to the screen, you'd never notice it. But those are the sort of edits I would do to it. At this point, let me hand back to myself at the studio, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in the show. So I'll see you then. Right, yeah, that was a lot longer than a 3-minute edit, but I wanted to just cover a few of the extra bits and pieces on that, which means that my review bit will be a lot shorter. So, moving along, yeah, backups. That's the other theme for tonight. So let me just talk a little bit about backups. We started this theme last week. With looking at backup media and how long they can live for. This week I want to look at the process that's involved with backing up. Now I know that a lot of you on here will already be familiar with backups, but for the sake of anyone who's relatively new to photography, I think it's worth us going through this, and also just as a sanity check for images, for what you're doing yourself. So there are two types of backing up traditionally. There's a full backup where you copy absolutely everything on the disk to your backup media, and then there is incremental where you just copy the things that have changed. A full backup, as I say, gets everything, and often with backup software, it just stores it all in one big file, which can be tricky to access things on there. But it does compress it, things like that, and you will need the software that you use to extract it all and get it all out again. The Microsoft backup works along those sort of principles. An incremental backup looks at the differences between the last backup that you took, last full backup, and anything that's changed, and backs that up, which means a restoration can be a multi-stage process. You have to restore the first backup, and then depending on how the incrementals work, it can be you have to restore each incremental in turn, or it may be that that each incremental you do is just a difference between now and the full backup. So again, check your software on there. Again, data compressed. Full restore can be a little bit complicated. I prefer to use a different approach. I use what is generally known as file synchronization software, and that looks at the folders and compares folder A with folder B and keeps them in line, which is another way of approaching it. And depending on the software, it can work both ways. Ideally, for backups, you only want to work one way. And the advantage of doing this is because it's done on a folder by folder basis, and it's not stored in archives and things like that, is you can access the files directly. The downside is it's not compressed on it. And you don't need any special software to get at your backup files. So what do I use? I use a program called Vice Versa by TGRMN Software. Last time I priced it up, it was about $60. I've had it for years, but it is quite a good one. I think there may be a free version available, but it will have some limitations on it. It is very, very flexible, very powerful. You can go one way, or you can do synchronization between two. If you've got a disk that you use on a laptop and on a desktop, and you need to keep two disks like that synchronized, and you can change on either, it can handle that sort of thing as well. What I really like about it is a facility called archiving, which means when you synchronize your folders, when you copy over and change, if something's been deleted, it doesn't just delete it off the archive, it puts it off the backup. It sticks it into an archive for a limited period of time, which you can configure. So that, in other words, if you've deleted a file, the problem with a lot of backup software is that if it's deleted on the original and you copy everything over to the backup and overwrote an older backup to do it, then it's gone on the backup as well. But by having this sort of archiving system, it means you at least maintain it for a short period of time, or a configurable period of time. Dimitri just saying that on the chat that the Mac Time Machine is a sort of hybrid of the two. I've heard mixed things about Time Machine. Some people say it's very good and they swear by it. Other people swear at it. So I'm not a Mac user, so I can't really comment on that. The idea of versioning and smart archives possible. So here's a sort of screenshot of what it looks like. You can specify which folders, which go over to which disks. I've had it set up for years and it works really well for me. And then you get a report at the end to tell you everything's done. And just periodically, as I go to bed, I'll every few days, I'll just set it going and make sure everything's backed up. But that's the sort of the type of software you've got. But what are the principles? The golden rule for me with backup is 2 places, 2 copies. 2 copies, 2 places. In other words, I should have at least 2 copies of my images, and they should be, I should have copies in at least 2 places. And that's because the classic mistake that I have unfortunately heard this happen to a photographer. They were faithfully backing up all their files, but then what happened was they had the house broken into, the computer system was stolen, and all the backups were stored next to it, and the backups were stolen as well, and the poor photographer lost everything. So you can't rely on everything being in the same place. You need off-site backups. That's critical to any strategy. Effectively, you usually end up with 3 copies with something like that. Your master copy and at least 2 backups. And you always overwrite the oldest version on there. And it's sometimes referred to as a grandfather, father, son approach on it. So how does all this work in practice? Right, I'm going to try and make myself a little bit smaller in the frame on this. You'll see why in a moment. Right, there we go, mini-me. This is how my backups work. And this is a big infographic. Hope you enjoy the graphics on it. Let's suppose I'm going out to do some photography. I go out with my camera into a forest and I capture a photograph of a butterfly in camera. Now at this point, I've got 1 copy of my photo. So if anything well, actually I haven't, because I've got dual slots in my camera, so I always have 2 copies. But for most people, you've probably only got 1 copy at this point. So as soon as you get back home, it's important to power up the PC and get that file copied onto the PC. Thereby, you've got 2 copies of the photograph. That's the first principle, at least 2 copies. So that means I can go out again. I can go out and photograph, but I don't delete what's on my camera at this point because I've only got 1 copy back at base at the computer. I've got the one in the camera, one backup base. If I delete that, I'd only have one copy. So I don't delete from the camera until I know I've got a second copy back at home. So I've gone out and I've created another shot, somebody in the Amazonian jungle on this occasion, and then head back home and I add that to the computer. So I've now got 2 copies, but I've got 2 copies in one place. And I don't really want to rely on the camera as being one of those copies. So what do? I get my backup drive up. Well, in reality, it's already always connected to the computer, but for the sake of argument, it isn't. I get it connected, and I then run my backup process and copy over everything that isn't on the backup over to the backup folder. At that point, and only at that point, will I delete off the camera. I'm back to the stage of 2 copies. I'm making sure I've always got 2 copies before I do anything. But this is 2 copies in one place. What do? Well, I have an off-site location that I can store my backups. It's at my mum's house. So when I'm going up there, I will take backup copy number 1, disconnect it from the computer, and I will take it up to her house. And then I will gather the version that's there and I bring it home. Connect it to the computer, run the backup software again. So now you can see I've got 2 copies. Well, actually I've got 3 copies, but they're across 2 locations. So I'm covered for just about anything going wrong on that. So what happens when I travel? I haven't got access to my off-site location while I'm on a cruise ship or anything like that. So what do? Well, I take my computer with me so that I've always got that. And more often than not, when I'm traveling, the laptop does come with me. So I take the wonderful sunset photo while I'm traveling. I can then add that onto the computer, but I leave it in the camera as well, so I've got my 2 copies. But I'm paranoid about that, and maybe my memory cards will get full. Certainly it happened when I did a 10-week cruise last year. So I take with me a portable hard disk drive, which is my travel backup disk. And so I connect that to the computer and copy over anything that I've created during the trip, which, if you'll notice from the graphic there, it's just the sunset image. Why just the sunset? Because the others are already backed up at home. I don't need to take a backup of those. So once that's on the backup there, the portable backup, I feel safe to remove it from the camera, 2 copies. So when I get home, what do I then do? Well, I've got my backup drive reattached to the computer, so I can copy over the missing file, which is the one I created on my trip, or the ones I created on my trip, into the backups. Then next time, at that point, I can then delete it from the travel drive, and the travel drive is then clear, ready for my next trip. Disconnect that, pack it ready for next time. Don't need it again. So next time I go up to see my mum, I disconnect backups 2, take them up to her house, collect backups 1, bring that home, connect it to the computer, and you'll notice that the sunset image from the trip, the photos from the trip, aren't on there. So I run the synchronization process and bring that over onto the backup drive. So that is basically the principle of how I do it. Right, let's see if I can make myself big again. Oh, no. Technical hitch again. That's better. I don't know why it does it sometimes and not others. Right, okay, so how do we reduce the risk of problems happening? Well, as I say, it's there's only one point in my workflow where there's only one copy of the image, and that's when it's in camera. And in my case, I say It isn't actually, there's 2 copies because I've got dual slots. But for most people, that's the only point when you've only got 1 copy. So you want to get that onto some of the media as soon as you can after the shoot. Now, if you haven't got 2 slots, what can you do? Well, there is a trick. If you're traveling and you've got multiple cards, what I always say to people is halfway through the day, swap your cards over. That means that if you get a corrupt card, you only lose half of each day. So you've got something from every day on your trip. You're not, if you can change them over more frequently, even better, rather than waiting for that card to be full. And just keep toggling them back and 2, and that spreads the risk of corrupt cards. Another thing to do to reduce risks, I mentioned this last week, when you buy backup media, make sure it's a different manufacturer to your main media. Don't buy two discs at the same time, one for backup, one for major, for live, because the chances are if there's an inherent problem in the batch, it will affect both at the same time. So I always make sure that my backups are from a different manufacturer so that reduces that risk. And here's the other one. Make sure you can actually restore from whatever backup solution you have. Can you get back a file that's been deleted? Try it. Make sure that you can, because it does happen that you might not be able to. True story for you. I worked in IT before I was a full-time photographer, and I got assigned to a particular group, and they hadn't got a systems administrator. Hadn't had for several months, and I was given that task. And they said one of my jobs was to change the tapes for the backups each night. And they said, don't worry, we've been doing it whilst we hadn't had an administrator. Every night we've changed the tapes. The first thing I did was to have a look at those tapes, and I discovered that for about 6 months, they had been changing the tapes faithfully every night. But not one of those nights had the backup actually written any data to them. Thankfully, they didn't need them. But had they needed to, they couldn't have restored from the backups. So always check that your backups work. Okay, 3-minute challenge. Back to the feedback. So now let's power up and get Rick's feedback in here.
Okay, back in Lightroom, just to give some feedback on the image. If we go back to the before and after, we can see a fair change. For me, again, it was quite dark initially. Now, where that light's placed, the softbox or the octa, we kind of removed it in Lightroom. It's quite close, directly above. We can see the eyes. It's got some light in the eyes. We've got a bit of a catch light, but there is a bit of shadowing in there because of the direction of the light, plus the leaning forwards, and it's creating a hot spot here that we can see. Obviously the edit that I've done hides that in a way, but we can see it's hotter in exposure over here, and we can see that in Lightroom in the readings until we go over here. So it's not going to be a clean, seamless white. Now the floor would need a fair whack of work on it, which okay, you didn't go that route on yours, so we can actually even see it on your edit there. Highlight, hotspot here, and then falls off across there. It's not that it's wrong, it just starts to look a bit muddy and patchy on a cyc or on a white seamless setup. Obviously these boards that are down, they do get scratched over time, and they would just be a nightmare to clean. Quite frankly, I would replace those rather than sit here dealing with all of that crap in Photoshop, but that's just me. Yeah, it's just, wow, okay, they need replacing. How much is your time worth editing that out? Anyway, bit more of a neutral colour. Like I say, it does look a little bit patchy. For a white seamless set, I'm not going to say it's high key, but a white seamless set. If we go to, where are we? Saturation all the way down, poor man's black and white. We can even see it here, it's hotter in the highlights here versus over here, that way. Let's get those back up to where they are. Again, my normal -4 saturation settings are for my cameras, it's just the default Lightroom settings. There we go. Nice and sharp. Composition wise, let's see, let's change that out to rule of thirds. It works, it's strong on the composition. Sometimes it's nice to push your light in close for the fall off effect that you want, and then the light ends up showing in the corner. That's fine, I do that a fair bit myself. But I quite like the composition on this. I don't know about what's going on with the hand here, whether it's actually just kind of a caught moment or not, whether they were just about to plant their hand somewhere on the face or what they were doing. Maybe it's related to the character that I don't know, I'm not sure. The negative space here works well. You could, again, if you cleaned up the white background and the floor and took it to white, you could then extend that later in post to have negative space this way. So there's a lot that you could do with it to improve it. Now, a couple of bits on the jacket that would need removing as well, but that's fine. Well, this material is kind of like duvetine, it just eats light. A quick tip for you, Michael, is when you're shooting, if you can, you may not be able to do this in workshop and group environments, I appreciate, but take a bit of a closer look on the set. Is there anything that can be cleaned up? Is there, laces that can be tidied up, or is there anything fluff or hair wise that can be taken off the floor? I mean, there's not much you can do with this floor because it's a mess, but there's elements like this white cotton here that could be removed. Yes, easy to fix in Photoshop, but I'd rather take a quick look around the set, get rid of that before I start shooting, and any bits of fluff with a lint roller and what have you. It just saves you the work later on, more so there really. But overall I quite like the light, nice dramatic fall off, a little bit of light in the eyes. That works really well. I'd like to have a bit more context on what the character is. I know you've sent a bit of a document with your images, but I've purposely not read them, more to just come into it from a fresh, clean slate. But maybe I should, to reference the characters. Anyway, well, that's my feedback on this image. Like I say, if we pop up my edit and your edit together, there we go. Totally different styles in terms of colour. I've gone a bit more neutral, you've gone to a greener shadow tone. Again, it's all subjective. That maybe that's reference to the character that the cosplayer is playing. I have no idea on that regard. But thank you very much for sending the image in, and we shall pass back to Ian.
Right, okay, thank you, Rick, for the feedback on that. Yeah, the information that Michael sent us about the image, he says, and if I read this out, this was taken late last year as part of a personal challenge. I had not been able to do much shooting last year, but wanted to try out two things. One, shoot with someone new, and two, shoot unassisted in a studio I had never been to before. Things didn't quite work out that way. Instead, I did an outdoor shoot with, hang on, is that the right one? I'm not sure it's the right one. That's the first one on the list. Let me just... Right, let me just check the reference number on that. 738. Oh no, it is the right one. Yeah. Things didn't work out quite that way. Instead, I did an outdoor shoot with a new model and worked with somebody I already knew in a studio that I'd never been to. My aim was to try and put into practice what I had learned from previous workshops and experiment with lighting on my own. The final result was colour graded to give a more fashion magazine look to it. Right, let me go over to the actual image. Unfortunately, I've been moving things around on my disk, so I haven't got the actual file with me here. A bit of feedback from myself. I think Rick's covered most of it. For me, I would like to see a little bit more space on this side. I think it's an interesting composition. I think the black and white effect on it does work. It makes it quite striking. I normally say to people, if you've got a subject turning up in black, shoot them on a black background. And I think that's probably still my preference. But in this case, the black on white, I think, has worked with it. A bit close to the edge here for my liking, and that's a personal thing more than anything else. The hand pose is a little funny, a little strange with it. And also the boards. Now, I know you probably didn't have control of the boards if it's somebody else's studio, but those two boards, which I struggled to clean up, were placed side by side. The best way to do it is to place them so that the one in the front, that your joins are horizontal, and the one in the front overlaps the one behind. So from camera point of view, from the way you're looking at it, it's like that, so that as you're looking at it, the edge is hidden onto the next one, and that join is then a lot harder to see. And the other thing I do in the studio with that is I always get my subject to stand where that join is, because then if it does show, it doesn't look unnatural going through the feet, and it doesn't need quite so much of a clean-up with it on there. Lighting, yeah, again, what Rick said, the danger of getting the hot spot round here with the face compared to the black, and we had to do quite a lot to bring the detail back in the black, and that's the problem of really black on white. It can be an interesting effect as we've got here, but personally I would have gone for a black background because that's the sort of thing I like, but that's personal preference. I think that's covered most things about it. I'm just going to have a look in the chat and see whether there's anything else that's come in on there about this. Anything else that Michael said? Yeah, Michael's saying that Zacharias talking about the whiteboards as well. Yeah, Richard's saying shingle them one over the other. That would screw up the reflection. Depends on how you set it up on that. On there. And you say, oh, the reflection of the chair legs. Yeah. I think that's majority of what I want to say about this one, Michael. So right, let's move on. I'm going to play in the beginner's course video at this point, which this time is the second part of the point of view that we started looking at last week. So here we go. Hello, welcome to video 13, point of view, which is part of the composition and point of view module within the Introduction to Digital Photography course. We're currently looking at the topic of point of view, and this is all about changing where we photograph from and how that can affect the image that we're creating. We've summed it up in the last video with the phrase, put the camera where the eye does not normally go. So what are those factors? Well, there are three factors that we can change. The height off the ground where we're photographing. So last time that was looking at a worm's eye view looking up, or a bird's eye view looking down. The other two factors are the angle of view. How much of the scene can we capture? Is it a small slither or is it a big area of the scene? And the tilt of the camera. Can we move the camera off to one side or not? Last time we looked at changing the height at which we photograph. This time we're going to look at the angle of view, whether it's wide angle or telephoto, how that affects the image, and the tilt of the camera and how that changes the image that we're creating. So let me explain with an example. This is a wide angle shot of a lone tent in a field. Story behind this: we went camping, arrived at the campsite, and the field was full. We couldn't get to pitch our tent around the edge of the field, which is what you would normally do if you're camping. So we pitched the tent in the middle, went out for the day, came back, and all the other tents had gone. There must have been a rally going on or something. And ours was the only tent in the field, and it was right in the middle. So I wanted to capture it as a photograph. And the way I did that was to put a wide angle lens on the camera, go as far away from the tent as I possibly could. My back is against the other hedge in the shot that you can see. And that made the field look wider and larger than it is, and the tent looked more lonely in the middle of it than it really is. So I've affected the image by that choice of lens and capturing more than you would normally see as a person standing in that situation. Let me give you another example. This is the organ at Wells Cathedral. And the first thing you will note about it is that I've created it from a worm's eye point of view, that looking up effect that we talked about in the previous video. But in addition to that, there's two other techniques going on here. First of all, I've used this wide angle effect. If you were to stand where I stood to make this image, you would not be able to see the entire cathedral in one go. You'd be looking around to be able to see it. So I've compressed that down to give you a view that the eye normally doesn't get, using this wide angle effect. But not only that, there is another slightly related technique going on here. What I want you to notice about it is that there is a symmetry to this image. I deliberately chose the midpoint of the organ to photograph it. Now, when you go to see a building like this, or a cathedral, or an organ, or something like that, you don't normally hunt out the point of symmetry. But when I'm doing this as a photographer, that is exactly the place I look for. I look for the point where, if there is true symmetry, that I can photograph it to give that effectively a reflection of the image on either side on there. And because that's not normally something that we do as humans, we don't normally seek that position out, this is presenting an image in a way that people don't normally see it. You don't normally see the symmetry of it in quite the same way as I've captured in this image. So 3 different techniques there about putting the camera where the eye doesn't normally go. I've done it from low down, I've done the wide angle, and I've created a point of symmetry as well with it. Another example of the use of wide angles to make an interesting point of view, an interesting perspective with an image, is this one of the boxing match. And what I've done here is I've come in close to the ropes, used a wide angle, which allows the ropes to appear much wider than they actually are. And that in turn allows us to see the boxers through them clearly. I actually learned something else with doing that shoot as well. I learned that those ropes actually move far further out than you would expect. And once I'd created that shot, I then quickly withdrew to a safer distance. Well, every day is a school day. Now, here's another thing, a lion and horse carving at the Vatican Museum. We've looked at this idea of wide angles, but let's go the other way. Let's think about details. You see, when we view a subject, we normally see it at a distance first, and then we move in towards it, and then we look at the details. So if we as photographers can present the details first, then it makes the image all the more striking. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's consider this image. If I presented this first, just the claws and in the neck of the horse, that single detail captures more about the ferocity of in the statue than the larger image ever does. So think about capturing details with your photography. Another one, a detail shot, and this is about coming in close, getting the small views as opposed to the big wide views that we've been looking at. And this works with this tap because we don't normally look at taps close up. We don't normally see the water frozen like that, and that's a focusing attention technique that we've previously looked at. But by coming in close, we present the world in a way that's different to how our viewer normally sees it. Let me give you an example here, which leads us on to our third technique. This is Jerash, and it's one of the gateways into it. It's a perfectly ordinary image, a perfectly okay image of that gateway. But we can do much better than that. And what I've done here is I've used two techniques. First of all, I've tilted the camera because, as we've seen, the human brain keeps the verticals vertical. So if we can tilt the world, the brain goes, "Whoa, I don't normally see the world like that. That must be quite interesting. That must be quite striking." Not only that, but it also introduces strong diagonals. And we've seen before about how a strong diagonal in a composition is something that makes a composition stand out. So I've done that. Not only that, with this particular image, I've also been able to introduce the worm's eye view. And all those together make for a very strong image. Again, using this quirky angle idea, theatre shot here from Servant of Two Masters. And because the background is quite long and thin, the Venice landscape, then by tilting it, that long thin becomes a diagonal. Our actress also becomes a form of diagonal in the composition. And I like to refer to this as a quirky angle, and I will often talk about quirky angles when I'm teaching. However, it is more correctly known as the Dutch angle. And if you don't know, the phrase a Dutch angle comes actually not from the Netherlands, but actually from Germany. And it goes right the way back to the 1920s, early cinematography. And for the movies in those days, what the German cinematographers used to do is they used to tilt the camera just a little bit to be able to introduce an idea of tension into the films and the movies that they were making. And this was known as the Deutsche angle. Now, English speakers have trouble with words like Deutsche, and it got anglicised as Dutch. So it's actually a Deutsche angle, now known as a Dutch angle, nothing to do with the Netherlands. Here, another use of it, Stockport Viaduct, and that tilt introduces drama into our image. And I just want you to compare this with the straight-on shot. And I think you'll agree that actually the image with the tilt is much more dynamic than this straight-on shot, even though the straight-on shot also has a train in it. And here again we can see that Dutch angle, that tilt of that quirky angle, and by adding that little angle to it, it makes this image much more striking. And not only that, it brings me on to perhaps my final point on point of view, and that is that sometimes the rear of our subject, just sometimes it can be just as interesting as the front. And here we see that in the King Tut death mask, how often do you see the back of it in a photograph? You don't. So it gives a different perspective, a different point of view on this subject. So our next video, still part of the Introduction to Digital Photography course, still part of the Composition and Point of View module, is going to look at the topic of critiquing. And we're going to look at why we critique and why I believe it is so important for us to practice doing that, and how it will help you improve your photography. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Right, we're back, and I've lost my PowerPoint slides, so just a tick while I get all that back. Technical snafus again. It's just taken a little while to refresh my screen to be able to do this. But the next part was going to be, and is going to be, all about the Q&As. So, we're getting there. I'm not quite sure what's gone wrong here. Right. Yeah, right, okay. So now let's get this on the screen. Slideshow. Oh, I don't believe it. Come on. Right. Right, we're back. Sorry about that, folks. Right, okay, so Q&A live. I've had 2 questions come in that I'm aware of with this. Let me just have a little final check for anything else. The first one was an alternative to Lightroom, and Peter wanted to know about this one. Was there any alternative to learn on? I think part of it is, well, what do you actually want to learn? And I know he answered that for me. Photo editing is primary objective. Bought FB add package. Remove objects. So yeah. Okay, yeah. If it's just pure editing of the images, there's 2 possible programs to look at. One is free, but is an absolute swine to learn, and that is GIMP. And it's a free bit of software. It is very, very powerful, like Photoshop, but it's not user friendly at all, I'm afraid. I've looked at it, and I struggle with it, to be perfectly honest. I don't need to use it, so I don't. The other product that's worth looking at, though, is a program called Affinity Photo. So if you'd search for that, Affinity have been producing software packages recently. They've got Publisher, Photo and Illustrator, and the 3 work together. I use their desktop Publisher. Brilliant bit of software. I've heard great things about their photo editing package, and I'm almost certainly at some point going to buy it myself. It's basically a replacement for Photoshop. You can edit Photoshop documents in it, and just about anything you can do in Photoshop you can do in Affinity Photo. So that would be the one I'd look at. The price, full price, is about £35, so it's not huge, but I believe they've got an offer at the moment during lockdown where I think it's something like 50% off, or there's 3 months free trial on it. So have a look at that, Peter, and see whether that solves the problem that you want. The other one that we had in was about going back to what we were talking about last week about JBODs and disk. Yeah, it's from Steve Hayward. he's got a RAID system and wants to know how to convert that over to JBOD, just a bunch of disks. And I can't give you a definitive 1, 2, 3 step answer on this because it depends on a number of things. First of all, it depends whether you've got backups independent of it, because the only way you can do it is to completely reformat what you've currently got. So that means you need to get all your data off there. So if you're already doing a backup onto something else and you know that the backup is complete and it can be restored, what you can do is make sure you've done your backup, check your backup, then reformat those disks. And how you do that will depend on the array that you've got as to how you do it. On mine, there are some dip switches on the back, and then you have to hold down certain buttons in a certain sequence and it will reformat it if you're in RAID. I never put mine in RAID to do that. So that would be the way to do it. If I knew a bit more about your setup, I could perhaps advise a bit more, but to be honest, it's one of those where you really need to have a look at the instruction manual for the package that you've got to find the best way to do it on there. Anything else coming in on chat before I go? No, nothing else. There was a question from Rick, but he starts by saying not for tonight, so I won't do it tonight. Also one that I think I'd need to do a little bit of research on to be able to give the definitive answers for. And so here we go then. Time to wrap up. Thank you all for watching, and again, sorry it's a long one. I will try to do better. That's interesting. Going back to the Lightroom one, Terry Hewitt has mentioned another free alternative called Darktable. I know nothing about this one, so can't tell you any more about that. You'll have to do your own research on that one, Peter. Yeah, please subscribe if you haven't done so, as I mentioned before. Please share the links to the show. Please like it and all that. Play the YouTube game. It will help me along with it. My thanks to Michael for providing the image. And if anybody else wants to have a go at the 3-minute challenge, wants us to have a go at their image, do get in touch. I'll send you some instructions on that. We're okay for the next couple of weeks. And then we've got a few in hand if we need them. So we'll take it from there, but we're always looking for more. It'd be nice actually to have some which aren't people, to do some scenics on there. So if you've got some scenics, perhaps consider letting us have those. Do let me know what you want to see in the future. Am I going on too long? It's well over the hour again, sorry. Next time is going to be a critiquing special. In my Facebook group, I've put a call out for people to let me have images for critiquing as opposed to the 3-minute challenge, and for people to be willing to have a go at critiquing themselves. And those people who've responded to that, I'll be getting in contact with tomorrow to explain how we're going to do it and to give you some instructions on that. And if anybody else wants to, drop me a message, contact me at ianstudio.co.uk or on my Facebook group if you want to mention there. It'd be nice to have a good selection of people involved with that one. Hopefully I might even keep it under the hour. You never know. So that brings us to the end. So thank you everyone for joining us. And if you missed the beginning of it, it looks like Subvid's only just joined us. You'll have to wait for the replay. It does take a few minutes for it to all render at the YouTube end, but you can actually catch up at that point, or go back and have a look at things on there. Go and have a look at the other videos we have uploaded here. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you all same time next week. Right, for those of you who are still on the stream, this is the bit where I record the alternative ending for when I do the cut down version here in YouTube. Nothing of interest. Thanks for watching this cut down version of my weekly live stream. If you want to join the live stream each week, it's 7:30 on a Sunday night. Just check in here at the channel. If you want to see the full version of this live stream, you need to join my Photo Academy at IanStudio/join. You'll get the whole details there. It doesn't cost much. It's only £6 a month or £60 a year, and it really does help me. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next live stream. And until then, keep making good photos. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down here so you'll get notified of future videos. Up here is a playlist of videos similar to this one, and here's one specific video that I think you will like, whereas down here is one that YouTube thinks you'll like. Until next time, keep making great photos. Bye for now.